Hello, welcome to episode 11 of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. If you're playing this back at a later time, welcome. If you're here live on Zoom, you get to participate by submitting your questions and comments on the Discord. We're building an international community that's more than 400 strong and growing, and the community is you, of course, coming from diverse locations, congregation sizes, and faiths. At the technical level, denomination is transparent, and we're but one in a related set of communities. If you're interested in a similar forum focused on Jewish worship, Leo here on our panel hosts one on Sunday afternoons at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. If you're an educator at any level, teacher or administrator, interested in technology for education, you want to check out office hours on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. There are several other shows dedicated to various media production technologies. You can look for links to those in the Discord under related shows. So, and all of these communities and shows are interactive communities because not only are you learning from us, we're all learning from each other. The information that you share during the show and on the Discord helps others in the community. And this interaction is more than half the value of these communities. Our Discord is open for you and there to promote 24/7 discussion, information sharing, Q&A with each other and our panelists, and you'll find future show agendas and past show recordings and special announcements about things that are coming up. It's also where we take your questions during the live show, like right now. You can ask a question anytime during the show. Just write it into the channel named Live Questions, which is under the category named Live Show. Speaking of questions, it's time for the question of the day. Has the power of story ever influenced your own learning experiences? Okay, put your answers in the question of the day channel. Now, so we've been asking what specific training topics you're interested in, and we're starting to spin up some opportunities for you. Monday afternoons at 3 o'clock is the first one, and Mark Plukas here on the panel is going to do workshops on sound mixing. Beginning with the functions of analog and digital audio mixers. And he'll be demonstrating best practices for setting up a mixer, signal flow, gain staging, compression, uses for mix buses. So tune in right here. Same meeting IDs and all that at 3 o'clock on Mondays Eastern. Thank you very much, Mark, for doing that. And a number of people have requested introductory training on OBS, such as how to set up scenes and sources for picture-in-picture and for dual picture and overlays. I think we might see some of that today, and if there's still interest, we can certainly take that further. And I know there are a lot of people watching here who are dedicated to the things that we talk about on this show. Some people who are dedicated to the technical aspects of worship. So if you would like to contribute to the panel discussions, then all you have to do is get here an hour early on Thursdays, and we'll let people in to join the panel between 6 o'clock and 6:40. That'll be time for prep and sound check. And at 6:40, we close the panel, but you can come in and listen. And if you want to get a behind-the-scenes look or even participate in our planning process, then you can join us on Sundays at 4:30 Eastern Time, same place right here. We can get into some fascinating discussions as we talk about what we're going to talk about on the show. So now, attendees, your microphones will be muted throughout the show until the post-show, when we have an informal and open Q&A session. So remember that we don't use the Zoom's chat feature. If you want your questions read, put it in the Discord channel named Live Questions. If you'd like to comment on something we say without asking a question, comments and chats are welcome in the live chat channel, and we do read it and we do reply. And finally, if you're new on Discord and would like a tutorial, let us know and we can schedule a time to help you with that. Next week, we'll have the second of our 3 winning congregations for their needs assessment. As we did last week, we'll familiarize ourselves with their sanctuary, their worship style, their streaming goals, their existing systems, and our panel will have a roundtable discussion about the equipment, the processes, the workflow we would propose to enable them to reach those goals. And while there are common elements, of course, in all of these systems, the differences are fascinating to explore because every room is different, all the acoustics are different, the camera angles are different, the needs are different, the budgets are different. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how different each one of these are. So, I don't know about you, but hang on a second, please. Just 1 second.
Marty, I just want to let everyone know that I put an invitation to the Discord into the Zoom chat, but that is to enable everyone to jump on Discord and move your questions to the Discord channel, the correct Discord channel. And what else did I want to say? Oh, and could you all please include your location in your name so we know where you're coming from? Not necessarily your congregation, but like the city and state where you're coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, J-Lo. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I tend to be a visual learner. Or rather, I comprehend and absorb information best when I have a visual in my head. The audio narrative that I'm hearing, whether we're having a discussion about technical things or signal flow or cooking or, whatever, um, whether it's the audio narrative that I'm hearing or pictures that I'm seeing that help convey everything that the person I'm listening to is trying to get across. That's the way I tend to learn and comprehend better. So, how do the pictures that we present to our viewers at home influence the emotional responses that the worship team is hoping to convey? And we can put up fixed and movable cameras in our sanctuaries. We can get lots of different camera angles. We can adjust light levels. We can get wide shots and super close-ups. We can do pans and sweeps. We can get reverses of the attendees in the room. We can use transitions such as fades and wipes and starbursts and lots of other fancy tricks. But how do we determine what is appropriate and when, right? So we're going to bring in Rob McKinnon. Rob is at his church his UU church in Jacksonville, Florida. And Rob, say hello and tell us what you have. Tell us about your setup there.
Well, hello. Like Marty said, I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida. I've been here since '92. I could tell you a brief history about myself if you're interested, but I guess not. I'll just move on. I want to show you what not to do real quick. And this is what you're not supposed to do when you're live streaming. And that's just select a different camera and watch your camera zoom around. That makes people dizzy. So step number 1, don't do that. So I want to show you a picture. This is our church. From the very back of the room, looking forward. Along the top beam, you can see a camera. Marty, is there any way I can share my screen with Zoom so I can show my mouse pointing?
You should be able to do that.
Who can share? Only host. Share screen. There we go. All right. Share. All right.
There you go.
All right. So right here we have our center camera, which is smack dab in the middle of the room. Over on the right-hand side, we have our second camera. A long time ago, we had 3 cameras, and they were mounted on the beam forward of that, but they were very low resolution analog cameras. But then we got upgraded to digital cameras, and these have a much higher zoom. These are actually 12x zoom cameras. We opted for 2 cameras instead of 1, basically. So first reason, most of all, is fault tolerance. And the second reason is so we can shift from one scene to another fairly seamlessly. So since you can see my screen, we have different views that I have set up. And so this is looking forward. And I want to zoom out a little bit. Nope, that's the wrong way.
Is this
looking
from your
forward-
center camera, Rob? This is your center camera, right?
This is the center camera.
Okay.
Off to the left-hand side, we have the piano. When we have stage performers, they're up on the left-hand side of the stage right here. You can see we got a boom mic, usually SM57 or 58 for the guitarist and for the guitar and the singer. We also have a condenser mic over here in case we need to have a whole bunch of folk group around one microphone. We have our chalice against the wall back here. And over here we have the caring candles and the joys and sorrows microphone. So instead of just zooming or instead of panning back and forth, it's much easier to do this with a nice fade between one camera angle and another. So for our musicians, usually I shoot this from the right camera across the stage to get the left side of the stage. And that really cuts down on the glare in the mornings. For our chalice lighting, I use camera 1. Same for our joys. I use camera 1. Piano, I go across using camera 2. At the end of the church, at the end of the service, I pick up as much as the congregation as I can on camera 2 with a massive zoom out to try and just show the people in Fernandina Beach, our remote congregation, who all's in here, and so they can see. They can't talk to them right now, but perhaps in the near future, thanks to OBS and Zoom, we will be incorporating them into our service.
So, okay, that's great. So choice of camera angle is important. You mentioned something really interesting, that if you were to choose the left side camera or stage right camera to shoot the musicians, you'd get a lot of glare off the windows. But because you're shooting from the stage left camera, or the one that we're seeing now, you don't get that glare, right?
Correct.
Very cool. So if you were to set up, and your Pantone zoom tilt cameras, your PTZ cameras, they're set up with presets for certain shots that can be recalled at the push of a button.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I'm sure people would like to see.
Well, here, see if you can do this for me. So you imagine we're in a service, and you're going to open with a wide shot, right? So you give us that wide shot. Okay, so now now you're going to do, the first thing is probably opening music. So you're going to you're going to set up your second camera to shoot the musicians, right?
Right.
And then you would fade to that,
Right.
right? Now, would you switch to the camera before you hit the preset or after you hit the preset? So would we see that pan and zoom?
So one of the things I haven't finished yet, prior to the whole COVID thing, we were running VidBlaster software, not OBS. And so I was going to use a training session with my other cohorts in crime and show them how to set up the presets on the cameras and help them so they could, so we could have two cameras set up for almost every shot. And I could demonstrate that, but that's not finished yet. So normally, yes, what I had done in VidBlaster definitely was fade out from one camera and shift to the other camera before. Now it's not complete yet.
So you're recalling the presets from OBS.
Right.
Okay. And so you don't have a separate camera controller.
I do have on the left side of the screen is the PTZ Optics plugin for OBS. And I can select camera 1 and camera 2. And so I could go to preset 1 on camera 2. I don't remember what preset 1 is off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But normally what I just do is I would just set it up with a scene. All right, so next scene is, let's see, like scene 1 would be introduction to the musicians, and then scene 2 would be, well, musicians stage left. And then I would have two cameras, one for the center camera and one for the left or the right camera, I guess it would be. And I would fade in to the other camera so that you don't see the camera moving.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you tried studio mode where you'd get a preview and a program screen?
Like this?
Yeah. So now if you selected another scene in preview,
Mm-hmm.
your camera should go to it. And now you can switch to it.
With the transition button at the top.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Put it back
not
to
with that.
studio mode.
The center between, there's a transition button, right? So now go to another camera shot in preview.
Oh, my bad.
Recall your scene, right? And now you can transition to it. There you go. Oh,
Ew.
interesting.
Doesn't do it until it's active.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so that's a nice demonstration of
So just so that people understand what Rob's doing, the very first thing that he's looking there, if you do the right click on that and do properties,
Right.
on that's it.
Ah.
On that top one, that one, that's it. Thank you. Rob is calling the camera and he's putting in an address which actually tells it. The very last bit, it says, and 4 says go to position 4. I think actually it goes to position 3 because it starts 1 up, if I remember rightly. Oh no, that's the bird dogs do that. This doesn't. Sorry,
Correct.
my fault. The bird dogs, you have to take 1 off the number each time. But on the PTZ, it does this. So he's doing 2 commands. One is to move the camera, and the second is to show the camera, which is there. Rob, do you have a Stream Deck?
I do not. No.
Okay. So what you can do is if you've got a Stream Deck as an example, you could actually do the command to move. You then pause, you then hold for 5 seconds or 3 seconds, I think it is roughly, while the camera is moving. And then you do the command to shift to the second camera. And you can do the whole lot in there
As a macro.
as a macro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about different parts of the service and appropriate camera angles. So I remember being at a watching General Assemblies, the UU General Assemblies, and there was a band playing, and they were playing this wonderful song, and the director, the person who was directing the cameras, would go to the lead guitar player just as soon as he was done with their lead guitar riff. And then they'd go to a singer. They'd go to the whole band during a lead vocal, like a verse, and then go to the lead singer when the verse was done. And so now they're harmony singers, and we're watching the lead singer stand there. And then they went to an acoustic guitar player who was not playing at the moment. They were tuning their guitar. And he was always late. I'm never really catching the beginning of a musical part. And he was just totally out of sync with the song. And it was kind of frustrating to watch, actually. It's like, this is a great song and this is a great band, and I want to see them play. I don't want to see yesterday's shot. So the arc of a service, has similar components to it, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's a crescendo, there's, and then there's an ending. And, you could have a minister who is in the middle of the sermon really getting to their point, and they're focused and they're descriptive. And that's a great time to get a medium close-up shot, right? And not necessarily a wide shot. What other times, would you choose one shot over the other? Anybody? So we have music playing, and, you can have a similar situation where you'll have percussion, you'll have a piano player, you'll have a singer, maybe a guitar player, and it's really helpful to know in advance the arrangement of the song, when each musical instrument is playing, when the verse is, when the chorus is, so that you can prepare your shots in advance and know when they're coming up. And let's see, story time, right? Story time is a great time for preparing your shot for where the storyteller is going to be standing, right? You want to know that in advance. And they want to know that they want to return to that same spot between rehearsal and during the service. And if there are kids going to be scattered around and you want to get, just a wide shot of everybody sitting looking at the storyteller and getting reaction shots, those are good things to set up in advance so that you can recall them in a push of a button.
I think what you're always trying to do is that, as you say, you're orientating people, Marty, and people, when you're very close into a picture, people don't actually know where they are. And, by orientating people, as you say, you're bringing them into a view so they can see, so they know where they're sitting back again. Is that what you're trying to explain?
Yeah, there's that too. You want to be able to give a sense of the room and where people are.
But also, when the minister is in the middle of their sermon and it's the deep part, a nice zoom in to the minister during that serious part, I think could be very effective as well.
Right. Yeah, it's always nice to, start a sermon. Sermon usually starts after a song or after some other announcements or something like that. Something will lead into the sermon. That's the way it should be planned. And you would get, I would imagine that I'd start with a wide shot of the congregation. Everybody is settled into their chairs, they're warmed up. It's the middle of the service. You want to get a nice sense of the room, and then a real slow push in, zooming into the full chancel, right? So now we're bringing the people who are in the sanctuary, we're bringing them out of the picture and focusing everybody's concentration in on the pulpit and the chancel, and hold at a medium shot where you'd have, floor to head shot of the minister behind the pulpit. Nice shot of the pulpit. You're seeing the walls of your chancel, some your tapestries. You're getting in now. They're introducing their sermon. They're introducing their topic and their subject, and they're telling a story. And you might get a side shot of them. So fade into a side shot, so get a different perspective on their posture and their body language. And if you're in the type of sanctuary where there are other people sitting on the sanctuary who are paying attention to what the minister is saying, it's real nice establishing a sense of the room. And it's part of how we can make people feel like they're actually in the room, is by giving them a sense of what else is going on, rather than having just a close-up shot of a person talking like I am. There's nothing else happening in this room, but the viewer doesn't have any sense of what this room is. I could be in a bedroom, I could be in a closet, I could be in a warehouse. You don't know that. If I were sitting in a sanctuary, you would want to know that, and I would want you to know that, right? So giving people that sense of room. Now, as JLo was saying, and when they get into the meat, the core, the crescendo, the point of the sermon, you get in closer so that you can see facial expressions and you can see hand movements real closely. Because remember, people are watching on different size screens, right? People are watching on a tiny little cell phone screen, or they could be watching on their 65-inch flat panel screen in their living room. You don't know, so you have to try and accommodate everybody. And then you get past that part of the sermon, and now maybe you want to ease people out and come out to a wider shot, ease out and take a look around the room and see what people's reactions are to that part of the sermon. And just feel out the congregation, feel out the vibe of the room and the mood of the room. And then after the sermon is done, there'll be music that's playing, and how soon you cut to the band. You can, if the minister is lingering on the sanctuary or on the pulpit, or if the band is starting a little bit early, choose your transition time and how you get there. You probably don't want to do hit a preset and use the same camera and zip over to the band. You want to do a fade, something that eases people over, because you're affecting how people are feeling emotionally. And you want to be conscious of that. It's when you're planning your shots and your transitions, try to be deliberate and in sync with the mood of the service. It's always a really good thing to do.
I think from my perspective, Marty, I see two different ways where people do services and they both work. I wonder if Rob can just bring OBS back up again, and there's two little quick things on there while he does it. But the key that you find, I think, is some people will use down on the right hand side, you'll see it says scene transitions, and there's fade and there's a timing. So if you look at this and you go between, if you increase that duration, Rob, right up to 900 milliseconds, you can do that. Thank you. And then you go to your cameras on your scenes. It only works on scenes. It never works on sources. So you'll see this. If Rob now goes and flips between another scene, you'll see that the camera transition is much slower. It should be much slower. The transition, the fade is really slow. So it's nearly a second, which is really nice if you're doing very few transitions. If we change the fade, scene transition, Rob, from fade to cut, go back to there, there's a cut, I think it is called. Yeah, that's it. And now you do the same thing. You'll see it's instant. So hopefully if we go to 2 that don't move, thank you, that's it. If you're doing lots of cuts, if you're doing lots of scene transitions, I think cuts work quite nicely. But if you're a church which goes more for occasionals, I think that fades work better. Martin.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, you want to do this gently, so you're thinking about not disrupting the flow, as Marty was saying. So you really are their eyes. I know a lot of us aren't back to in person. How many of you guys are more than 50% in person? You guys?
I don't think there are a lot of people here who are in person yet.
Okay. So we're really, it's almost like when you say hybrid events, I mean, we're really almost doing digital first here, or we're doing the show for the congregants, right? Because we're not really trying to do anything for people on site.
Well, what we're doing here is we're helping people make the transition. So some sanctuaries have cameras in already, like this one does, and some are preparing to. And so what we're doing is we're working on the skill sets, we're working on the techniques, and we're working on the technology at the same time. So what we're talking about generally is for when there will be people in the sanctuary.
Gotcha. Because for ours right now, we're fully back. But what we found is that people got so used to being at home that they don't want to come in, or some of them are scared. They haven't gotten vaccinated yet, and they're just kind of hanging back. And so that's who I'm trying to keep in mind, is who's at home, and how can I best make this flow for them? Because they're not the bishop, but they're still looking at the audience. They don't care about the digital at all. They're just so it's a different mindset for are we documenting this as a show for digital first or for hybrid? Because they barely even acknowledge the online audience in our session. So it's like they don't even exist. Which is interesting. I mean, hybrid, you would say, like, acknowledge them and maybe someday bring them in.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk here a lot about engagement and interaction to try and bring the 2 different sets of congregants together, or at least to acknowledge that the other is there. And so we're doing this visual show for an audience at home, and we're also trying to engage that audience with the people in the sanctuary as much as possible and as much as practical. So I want to introduce Guy Cochran, who is the president and CEO of the DVE store, is one of our favorite places to go for buying all kinds of equipment and accessories and toys to play with. The DVE store has been very supportive of shows like this one and others, and he's a frequent contributor. So, and he's a special guest tonight because he's going to be talking with us a little bit later on about how to choose a video switcher, or a vision mixer, as we call it. It's engagement and interaction is important. Now, I noticed that Rob has a projector set up in the sanctuary. I don't see a screen, but Rob, can you Do you use your projector during your services?
Rob?
Sorry, I should unmute myself.
Ah, okay.
So not very often, but sometimes, yes, we do.
Where's your screen?
Usually when requested by guest ministers or special presentations, or sometimes the director of the youth group wants to show a YouTube video or something.
Have you opened up your sanctuary yet?
No, not yet.
No. Okay.
I'm hoping they will soon, now that most of our people are over a certain age and have both vaccines. So I'm hoping soon.
And so one of the and we do, when we do bring people in the sanctuary, some of the things that we were talking about utilizing screens for is to try and minimize or eliminate the use of shared paper products like, hymnals and announcements, even orders of service. They can be projected on a screen, and providing that acknowledgement of the two different audiences. You can have one of your cameras show your in-person attendees to the Zoom audience, and then you can show a gallery view of the Zoom audience to the people in the room using your projection system. You can even do, a greeting time where everybody is talking to each other, and you can bring in audio from Zoom and send audio from the sanctuary out to Zoom. You can do lots of different things, and being creative that way to engage the two audiences together can be a very cool thing. And do we have any questions, Joe? There must be some building up.
There must be something somewhere. Hang on 1 second. I actually have a quick question for Guy before we go. What denomination are you, Guy?
I'm an investigator of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I help out with their live streaming currently. I've been hanging out with these guys for about 8 years, checking it out. I'd say that's a long time to not be baptized yet, but formerly grew up Christian. And so, yeah, but I have fun. Our store helps all kinds of houses of worship. So
Right.
I love the fact that I was able to get kind of volunteered into helping streaming because I love this stuff. So I can't wait till it's my turn to show some of this stuff because I'm running into the same.
You have to use the term that you used the other day. You were
voluntold. Yeah, it's kind of funny because they were already pretty well set up for streaming at the main, what we would call the stake center. So they get the bigger dollars because that's where we all meet like once a quarter. But yeah, the smaller wards, we call them, there's a little budget. So it's kind of funny. And so when we get to my slides, you'll laugh because I see some of the questions coming up. You'd be like, don't you guys have like lots of money? It's like, it's
Right.
almost embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, so when I show you my setup, it's not even quite as fancy as Rob's. So, but I'll wait my turn.
The first question is from John Leaka from Silver Spring. He wants to know, how are his cameras connected to OBS?
I assume we're talking about Rob's cameras.
Yes.
So my cameras are NDI, and they are the only cable going to them is a Cat5 Ethernet, Cat5e. So that provides PoE control and NDI signal. They go to into a PoE switch and then into the computer's Ethernet port. And then there's an NDI
PoE
plug-in for OBS.
And PoE is power over Ethernet, just saying.
Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Right.
Next question. Can one person typically act as both video director and camera operator, or does it take two people, even with PTZ presets? That's a good question.
We've been doing it with one person since the inception, so it seems
It can be done with one. Guy, did you have something to add?
Yeah, we use two just because it allows one person to also focus on the outgoing stream. So what I do on my side is I have another volunteer that'll help run the PTZ, and on my side I'll handle audio plus checking the stream on the outgoing. So I'm actually listening to audio in-house, and I'm listening to 30-second delayed audio that's out on the actual stream. And if there's any hiccups, I'm able to identify it, because it's too much for one person if you are doing all of that, especially if you have, audio duties for a violin that may come in, or some kind of special musical performance. So I like to segment the two. I know not everybody has that luxury. Well, some have lots of crew, but
Rob
being as
doesn't.
Rob doesn't. Rob's amazing. He's juggling everything.
He's a show.
Sometimes you can get into a situation where there'd be a lot of things happening very close together. So you're making, video transitions, audio transitions. Maybe somebody isn't standing in the right spot, and you have to move your camera. And it's easier if somebody is got that role to just handle camera switching or camera control. Sometimes you may have more than 3 cameras in your sanctuary. You may have set up some fixed shot cameras for really close-ups. You could have a small camera, like even a cell phone, set up on a tripod, just focused on the chalice, for instance. You could have a small camera that is fixed on the piano player, and so these are ways to add more dimensions to your choices of video shots and get more personal things than just having your PTZ cameras. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work to get these done right, and having more people on your crew just helps make things more efficient. But yeah, it is possible to do it with one person. Guy,
Just the
yeah.
adage that many hands make light work, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we call the cascading failure, is when something goes wrong and you go to steer your attention to that thing, and then something else goes wrong and you're not able to catch that. And that's what brings you down, is that other thing. So it's normally not the first initial distraction, it's the second one that gets you. So that's why I really like to have at least 2 people monitoring things and segmenting some things out. And then if somebody gets sick as well, you still have that backup. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
next question.
Good point. Oh, Leo, we don't want to call on Leo?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you, Leo. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that the really nice thing with the PTZ cameras is that the ability for you to set those presets. So everything that everybody was saying is, yes, you definitely can have multiple people, and I would definitely recommend it. You can run it as one person, and I think I've demonstrated here before that we went through about 4 or 5 months where actually it was a rabbi on the bimah, which is our stage. She was doing everything. She was doing the swapping and everything, because there was only 2 people in the physical building at the time. Yes, you can do it. Was it stressful for her? Yes. Was it not as creative as we would like? Absolutely. But the other thing I would say with it on there is that if you do the presets, you're actually improving what I would say the base level of the consistency of the service. A lot of people also, I find, as we were talking about earlier, people like to see a similar view. And if that view is the same every single time, they can get comfortable with it.
That's true. Next question is Keith Miller from Paint Branch, Maryland asks, can you comment on having cameras in front pointed back to show faces of the congregation for the remote people?
I think that as long as people are aware that they could be on camera, I think that's a wonderful thing. It gives people at home a sense of what the room is like, of the people who are there. It helps to alleviate the sense of looking through, of a viewer at home being looking through the window, and just having a view of the pulpit and nothing else in the room. It's like they don't want to be an outsider. They want to be part of the congregation. You want to bring people into the room. Guy?
I'd say it really depends on where the stream is going to wind up. Like ours is, we have them in two different spots. One would be a private RTMP stream, which is only accessible to members. And so we know where it's going. And in that case, I don't think that it matters, but I have seen other congregations where they want specific roped off areas where you know that if you sit in this spot, you're not going to get on camera. And so that it's just different people, different faiths. They want specific things that some of them don't want to be on camera. So you just got to be aware. And if somebody makes a note of it, then you just got to say, the PTZs don't go into this area right here. So that's where you want to sit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Leo.
Yeah, to take that further, I've been streaming services for about 4 or 5 years. What we do typically is we take a picture of what the cameras will show. We put that up on the door so that when people come in, we say this event or this service is being live streamed. These are the seats that you're going to see. So you show them with the seats that are in view. Now, obviously, if you're going to have a camera pointing back, you've got to be aware. We've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. And one time I tracked a rabbi walking through and everybody went absolutely ballistic because I ended up showing all the seats that I thought I wasn't going to show. So we know that there are certain reasons not to do it. So just if you give the people the option, then people be clear.
I think that actually, so that answers the next question, which was how do you deal with congregants who do not want to be shown on streaming and recorded video? But a suggestion was another use for masks. So would you use masks for that or not really? And explain what masks are. That's what I would add on to that.
So I assume what we're talking about here is we're talking about masks on the output of there. So you actually mask off and I can never say the word properly, obfuscate parts of the screen.
Close enough.
I think it's it's doable. It's tough work at this level, I would say, to do it. But you can actually, if you're really worried about it, there is some settings, particularly in the PTZ cameras, which will actually enable you to say this camera can't go past a certain point. So you can actually lock it so that it can't, even if someone tries to press it, it won't go further than left or further than right.
I think Paul may actually have been a bit cheeky in his question and was asking about face masks.
I'm sorry, I've got to remember. I wonder if it would make sense to identify seats where within the sanctuary where people could be assured they would be out of camera view, so that they be able to you say, look, we are there may be times when when we're going to take a shot of the congregation, but we're going to focus on this area. If you don't want to be in the shot, take one of these seats.
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Let's move on.
There's a comment next, but after the comment, Sue Royer from Towson, Maryland asks, could we start with one camera? And what is the price for a PTZ camera? Depends. Depends on the zoom level. Depends if it's a 12x, a 20x, a 30x. Leo, go.
Yeah, it does. Can you start with one camera? Absolutely. If you want to get really creative at the cheapest budget, I'd say a fixed camera. One fixed camera and one PTZ camera is amazing what you can actually do, and people won't even realize that they're actually seeing only one fixed camera and a PTZ. You mount the two in the middle, typically, so they're a similar shot, but one is looking as your wide angle and one is your movable. You'll actually probably find, depending, and I'd be interested to know from Rob how many services he's done, but I found that we had a lot of problems that the people taking the service couldn't focus on where the cameras were when they were too wide apart. They didn't know which camera they were looking at. People were complaining they weren't looking at it. So actually putting the two next to each other solved the problems, but because one of them is a movable head and one isn't, you're able to get the other views and things there. So definitely you can do that. As for the costs, I'm going to pass that over to Guy, who probably has this sheet right in front of him.
I don't have the sheet right in front of me, but there's so many different models. But yeah, I mean, you can get into it for $1,000. I mean, we our church and I had nothing to do with the calling out of what they purchased. It was just a simple PTZ, or no, this one was an ADA camera in the very back. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's straight back, dead on. And then the controller was from Lumens, and then the encoder / switcher was just this box called a YOLO Live, and that's the whole entire system. I mean, beyond the house audio, but a very simple setup: one camera, one controller, and then an encoder, and that's the whole thing. Because they weren't sure, if they wanted to make a significant investment into this, because they weren't sure how long it was going to go on for. So this was bought pretty immediate in April, and of course there was a large run on everything. I mean, our store ran out of everything. Like during April, we just everything was gone. It was like all PTZ cameras, all encoders, all capture cards, everything was gone, as some of you know. But now we're starting to realize that some people want to stay home and they want to just be able to still do this stuff, and they want to grow it. So this is our opportunity to get the next camera. So we're going to go for 2 here pretty soon, because I think the justification is now there. Like, people don't want this to go away.
Guy, you said ADA. Did you mean the Americans with Disabilities Act?
No, AIDA is a camera manufacturer. AIDA. You can AIDA imaging is the proper name.
That's where my mind went. So,
I was going to say, wow, they're making some awesome cameras, and the American Disability Act, that's a special one. Yeah, I mean, we have some PTZ cameras that are what's called an ePTZ camera. Like, do I have it? Oh no, I stuck it on the other side. That are 4K cameras that are $299 that'll actually pan, tilt, and zoom, but they don't physically move. So they pan by taking an HD image and moving it around inside of a square, the sensor of a 4K image. So there's lots of wiggle room there, and you can actually control it with a remote control and presets, just as Rob was showing, but nothing physically moves. $299. It's a very wide shot. It's meant more for conference rooms and things like that, but that's my B cam. So when I started coming in and helping with the show, I wanted one more safety shot just in case something happened. Like Rob was saying, like if you want some redundancy, I had one shot that was not a very good shot, but it was something, something to cut to. It's kind of the Hail Mary thing. If you do have a single camera, you're going to be wishing a lot of the time that you could cover up, some slop, because that's the thing with the C6 fast pan, get into position, jello effect. It really does feel like you're being thrown around, and an hour of that or 2 is a little rough.
Should I move on to the next question, Marty?
Well, hang on a second, because that's Guy mentioned something really interesting that we had touched on in an earlier episode on cameras, but we didn't really explore very much. So, the difference between an HD camera and a 4K camera. We talk about 4K as a visual resolution that is much higher, is actually 4 times the resolution of an HD camera. And why would you need that in a church, especially if we're streaming out at, only 720p or 1080p? Why would you need a 4K camera? Well, it's not for what the image that you can put out, but it's for the flexibility that it gives you in your switching. So imagine this. So take your video, your 16:9 video image, right? So from the 4 corners, here, where are my fingers? And slice it in half, horizontally and vertically. With a 4K image, each one of those quadrants is a full 1080 HD image. And you can get a switcher that will actually take in that 4K image from a camera and output one of 4 outputs, like if you had 4 cameras. But you can also arrange it, like Guy was just trying to describe, that you can get an HD image that can be taken from anywhere within that 4K first frame. So Leo talked about having one fixed camera that's a wide shot in the room and one PTZ camera. Well, that fixed camera can be one of these 4K cameras and give you a wide variety of choices of shots and zooms just from the one camera without having it move for $299. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, here's
I'm,
that
I'm,
little.
I'm hopeful we've talked long enough so that the guy's going to actually show us in demo now.
This isn't a proper demo, but at least you can see this. There's two models of this camera. This is the 4K Huddle Cam. It only has a 4x zoom, but digitally it'll then go to 8x. And so they make two models of this one. One is a HDMI and USB. This one is the $499 PTZ NDI version. So you can actually pan, tilt, and zoom over one cable and NDI with power. So that's what Rob was using is NDI to be able to get into OBS. So this would drop right into OBS or any of the popular switchers. But yeah, that's what it looks like. It's just a little tiny, like big, little tiny. It's a monster looking webcam. If you put this on a computer, it looks very large, but you get the idea as to what it looks like. It's got the little clamps to hold onto a monitor as well. But yeah, and it has the remote so you can do the presets and everything. But yeah, you can start with one camera for $299. So,
And
nice
that's not
entry-level
something
piece.
you would put in the back of the room. That is something you'd put
No,
close to the front of the room because
yeah,
of
because of the
view
field
is
of
so
view.
wide. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, great.
Yep.
All right, next question.
Okay. DOTSNSF, I don't know who that is or where you're from, but the question is, how does one incorporate cell phone cameras? Or do you?
Well, you can. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. Guy?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. One would be natively to just pipe it straight in. A popular method in our church was something called a Larix broadcaster, and that would send an SRT stream up, which was very nice. Like, it's beautiful. Like, if you're using one of the modern iPhones, like a 10 or 11 or 12, it's gorgeous. Like a high bit rate, like 4.5 megabit. I'm shocked by how good it looks. Like, it looks better than the PTZ optics, to be honest with you. It's that good. The next way is to use something called Filmic Pro and take the conversion where you're actually going Lightning to HDMI and then taking it into a switcher from there. So another one is Cinemaker will allow you to do it wirelessly. I don't totally recommend that way unless you really don't mind a little bit of a degraded looking image, but Cinemaker is cool. You can do 4 cameras. It's a monthly subscription for iPhones, and position them around. If you watch the demo, I'll put a link in the is it the chat or where do we put links?
Discord.
You put them in the
Discord?
chat channel.
Okay.
In Discord.
All right, I'll
Leo,
drop
what do
one
you
in
got
there.
going over there?
So this is Larix, as just Guy said. So as you can see, you can see that's it on the screen. You should be able to see the screen of me and there twice.
Yeah. Cool.
So there are options. You can actually you can wire a cell phone into your video stream. Many of the whether it be the Lightning Thunderbolt connection on an iPhone, or even an Android phone can bring your video camera image into a USB port on your computer. You can go wireless. Leo just demonstrated a wireless. Another option if you're using OBS is a plugin called OBS Ninja, and OBS Ninja sets up a web portal that you can send a web link to somebody anywhere. Doesn't have to be in the room. It could be somebody at home. They open up that web portal on their phone, and now they have live picture right into your OBS. It's pretty damn cool. So those are a couple of different ways you can incorporate into your stream.
Is it safer to hardwire a phone into the system than to go Wi-Fi?
Well,
I
in
would,
as much as you have a wire that can't be interfered with, there's no RF involved, there's no Wi-Fi involved,
right,
and there's no internet involved. So, yes, it's always going to be more secure, and you're going to get a higher quality, more reliable quality using a wire than using Wi-Fi. But that's not always, practical. And
right,
some of the Wi-Fi ones actually work pretty well as long as you have a good Wi-Fi signal to work with.
right. That's the tricky thing.
Yep.
The next question is from Kermit Sprang from Woodinville, Washington. Isn't the center camera at Rob McKennon's church a fixed camera that is being panned by using the digital zoom?
No, it is,
Rob?
it is, it is fixed to the ceiling, but it definitely turns. It pans.
Right, and it makes a little noise too, right? It makes some noise when it turns.
Very little. They are very quiet cameras.
I think the question that Kamit's trying to get at is you can do zooming in two ways. You can digitally zoom and you can do zooming with the optics of the camera. Typically, I mean, Rob can actually zoom beyond, although it's a 12 times zoom camera, which he can do in the optics, he can go past that with a digital zoom. But what you're then doing is degrading the picture as you go further forward. It's just trying to make sure, it depends on what you're trying to do, but I would say that once you start doing that, you're going to bring the picture quality down and not do it.
All right, and there's one more question from Kermit Sprang, showed up in the show chat channel. He's asking, is there a source of information which will provide instructions for activating PCZ optics presets during preview in studio mode in OBS? I don't think there is no preview mode in without studio mode. If you're not in studio mode, you don't have that preview function.
No, you don't. But there's a ton of stuff. I would say there is an absolute ton of stuff on this on the PTZ Optic website, PTZ Optics website. They've got loads of how-to and videos showing you how to do a lot of stuff, and they've got a big rundown of how to put their cameras into OBS and into vMix and everything else.
Yeah. So actually the way to recall a preset before you take it on the show is to use an external controller that will go out, recall the preset, and then it'll be ready for you to take in non-studio mode. And then the last question is it possible to control the rate of zoom as part of the PTZ Optics presets to create a slow zoom? I don't believe so. I think presets
it's a thing that everybody has tried. In vMix has better controls over it than OBS, but everybody that I know said, I haven't found a good way, unless Guy knows a good way, bar using the joystick.
And there's some expensive cameras from Panasonic at the highest end that do have that. The UE150 it's a beast of a camera. It looks like, let me see if I can pull it up. We had one in-house for testing, and I was amazed. Like here, just for a size comparison, it's a monster. It's looking at a bird dog that's a pretty big camera. It like looks down like, who are you? And this thing's a monster. But the benefit there is that the motors are huge, and so the gearing allows for these very, very, very smooth moves. And then they did not only allow you to do a full optical zoom, but then with this camera, you actually have a 4K ePTZ at the end of the zoom. So you can actually still move around and push in more at the end of this zoom. So it's a really interesting camera. It's one of the more popular, but this thing's $10,000. It's very expensive.
My goodness. That looks like a picture out of Star Wars with R2-D2.
Yeah, just for a head comparison, like look at the size of his head and look at the size of that camera. It is gigantic. Big boy.
Wow.
And that has a 1-inch sensor, I believe, in it. That's got a massive imaging sensor.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. The picture quality, when I was at NAB 2 years ago and saw this picture quality, it was noticeably like it stood out in all the range. Like when you side by side them, it was very like broadcast, like it looked like a new show. It was very, very clean and very sharp.
Okay. Perfect time to transition to Guy's presentation, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So now that we've seen what cameras can do, how do we make those cameras do those things? Aside from moving them around, we can make cameras look different ways. We can make them look sharper. The whole Twilight Zone thing. We can adjust No, that wasn't the Twilight Zone. That was what was the other one? What was the other one?
Limits.
Outer limits. Outer limits. Thank you very much. We control the horizontal. We control the vertical. So, and the transitions between cameras, and we can do wipes, and I said before, all kinds of silly stuff. So, but there are a number of different switchers that we have to choose from: software switchers, hardware switchers, and different hardware switchers and different software switchers. Who can make sense of this all? Can you help us make sense of this, Guy?
Yeah, it's funny because we all, JLo, in mine, you're pointing at Leo. It's so funny. It's like, we're not all in the same order. Yeah, the most basic level of this is we're just going A/B. At the most basic, we're wide shot, close up. I mean, we're just cutting between two cameras, and it's just what we would call a real-time edit. You're just real-time cutting between one source and another source. So at a simple level, that box that our church picked up, it's an encoder and a switcher in one. So at the most basic level, this thing's just taking in multiple video sources and then changing as you tap on the screen, which is kind of cool to be able to tap on the screen. And we're going to look at a couple. I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of slides. And I'm using something to do this newsy style picture in a picture. Again, another example of a switcher where I'm just cutting in a source and being able to drop it in. So this is our church, as I was showing earlier. It's that same YOLO live box. I'm not a huge fan of the thing, but it does do something pretty unique, which is it acts as a switcher and an encoder in one. But again, we're just doing one camera, and sometimes I'll bring in my little huddle cam, which I showed, and that'll be our second camera. And that's the most basic setup. It's that box right there. This is it live. I brought in my little mixer, that one. The audio mixer is a big bad boy, and that one, it's a Sound Devices. But you can see it's streaming over to our web portal, and it's pretty basic. You choose a camera, and out it goes to the show. On the more software versus hardware side of it, what you're seeing me through right now is a software called vMix, similar to what Rob was using with OBS, and it's a pretty popular choice. vMix is only $60, and it allows you to do a lot. The thing that you need to keep in mind, though, in hardware versus software is latency. So anytime that it comes into the computer, it's going to take a little bit of time, and it may take enough time that if somebody's singing or on stage that it's unwatchable, because you're seeing them in front of your face, and then you're seeing an IMAG. IMAG is for image magnification behind them, and so that doesn't really work. So in this environment where we're just pushing out a stream, it's fine. The software switchers are going to work great. OBS is fine. But Leo, have you ran into this where you've had any kind of IMAG behind a presenter and had the latency issue?
Yeah, it happens on, as you say, it's just the latency happens on these things, and you've just got to be aware of it. On most of the stuff that we deal with, we're finding there's about 400 milliseconds of latency on somewhere about 330, 400 milliseconds. And there's ways around it, which I'm sure you're going to tell us.
Yeah, so one of the most basic switchers is something like this, a little roll-in device. And those little lights are just camera inputs. So camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, and in this case, camera 4. So this was a super popular model pre-pandemic. Lately, though, we've been seeing a lot more Blackmagic products that are along the same type of thing, where you're just cutting between different sources. Some people will include something like a slide or worship lyrics, so that they can have a computer input with ProPresenter or something along those lines. And this still allows you to do that because it's just HDMI. And I don't want to go too deep into HDMI, SDI, NDI. It's throwing around a bunch of acronyms, unless you guys want to. We can go that route, but before we go that route, I wanted to show you what it looks like at the highest levels. this is where we get into the big, like $20,000 forum-y panels where you can do multiple cameras and do 4 boxes. So a 4-up super source, we call it, and roll things in to where, you got multiple things going on inside those boxes. Plus you can do a bug or something like that. But it sounds like for this crowd, we don't need to go too crazy. At the most basic level, it's just ins and outs. So ins, in this graphic, I don't know how well you guys can read this, but the in here in our case would be a PTZ camera or a regular camera or an iPhone or a computer. Maybe in the future we'll be having, somebody from Zoom pop in. That would be really cool. That would be a real hybrid event where we can suck in somebody from Teams or Zoom or Skype and bring them in through our switcher and then make them a part of the show. So that in the middle here, we just have there's a big box. This is a new tech TriCaster. It's still a software switcher. You guys have probably heard of this term. It's a very expensive one. It used to be super popular. vMix is starting to make some inroads on this territory. But basically all it's doing is allowing you to bring in those inputs, add in some audio, maybe some graphics, and then also route things. Choose where you want them to go. Like maybe you want to go to the projector that's local. Maybe you want to go to another place like the nursery, or you can just route different things if you want different shows. Some people want things clean. Some people don't mind if there's graphics on them. Some people want just different looks. They want different shots for different folks. And then you could do things, translation or what's the hearing impaired, the sign language. Closed captioning, sign language, yeah. And then at the on the end there, we have our output, which can be, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, your own portal. I like Livestream because it's unbranded, livestream.com, Vimeo Livestream. But that's the real nuts and bolts of kind of the mid to high end. This is my son using something which I'm kind of blown away that he's now learning with iPads. So at his school for sports, they're now using the Teradek product. It's a software, Teradek Air, and they're just using multiple iPads on, inexpensive tripods, and they're doing a show. I mean, it looks amazing, and the kids are learning, and it's not a whole lot of money. I mean, they made the investment in some iPads, maybe $700 a piece, and it's just Wi-Fi. And so they have these contribution ones. There's 2 or 3 of these contribution, I would call them remote cameras. And then there's one that's cutting the show, which would be the switcher module. So we're seeing things from, the very highest end down to just iOS type switching, which works as well as that other software that I had posted in the chat, which is Cinemaker, is making some inroads as well. And then this is my setup at church in action on a Sunday. It's basically just the audio mixer, that YOLO Live box. I use my iPad with cellular for confidence, so I know what's going out to the stream, and I have my headphones and my AirPods to listen to both feeds. I put my AirPods on and listen to the stream, and I have my over ears for listening to the local, what's going out. So that's all my slides.
What do you use the monitor for? So if you're monitoring the stream on your iPad, what's
the big monitor? The gentleman that helps assist, my volunteer, he was having trouble with focus, and he started bringing in his own gaming monitor from home so that he can achieve better focus. Because there are sometimes I'm like, that's a little soft, because I can see it on my iPad's the 12.9 one right here, and I can see soft focus on this. And our encodes aren't going out that heavy. They're only about 2 megabit. They're so 2,000 kilobits per second. It's just 1280 by 720. It's not even full HD, but it looks good. People are happy. We don't have a beefy internet connection at our place. In fact, we have to remind congregants not to use the Wi-Fi while we're streaming. It's that bad. We're trying, again, a lot of people just don't want to spend a lot of money, and we just have to make do with what we got. So I figure ours is pretty bare bone compared to, some people they've gotten the purse strings to open up, and I see it all the time because we have a store. So our store is dvestore.com. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you could see some of the overhauls, even pre-pandemic, where we came in and took a standard definition church, ripped out all the old analog stuff that was, old GL1s and analog switchers running S-Video or RCA, and we converted it over to proper NDI or SDI. And now we've got, modern day images that look fantastic with the ability to cut in pro presenter hymns and do the picture in a picture fancy stuff, and also touch screen. So Rob set up, you can in vMix, you can set up to where you can just touch those shots, and it's kind of cool where you just pick the image that you want and you just touch it on the screen and the camera goes right to that spot. So you see it in preview and then you take it when you want, but you're just touching it. You can save the thumbnail of the shot that you want. So that thumbnail is there ready to for you to touch and get that shot.
All right. So don't forget to write in your questions. I'm sure there got to be a lot of questions about switchers because it's how we work, and we're seeing that it's really possible for even a small congregation to get into this and do a pretty good job with not a whole lot of money. You can work with phones, you can work with tablets, you can work with nothing more than a number of phones and tablets. There's another, aside from the yellow box and other things that were mentioned, there's another product called Switcher Studio, that's completely tablet based, but it's also completely Wi-Fi based, and that's always a risk. If you don't have solid Wi-Fi, if you don't have a good internet service at your place, you may not want to rely on Wi-Fi entirely for your service, because if it gets clogged up, you have no stream. There was
a question.
Yes.
There's a question in the box. I believe it's from John Lika in Silver Spring. When you set these systems up, cameras, OBS, etc., can you experience a time lag, the audio and the video, on a wired LAN? I think that's a yes. How do you fix it is another.
Yes. And so every time you go through a device into a computer, through a process, you apply a filter, you apply an adjustment. All of these things take a little time to process, and they will cause some sort of a latency delay. But you want to, sure. But you do want to keep your audio and video in sync, of course. And so that's where we get into compensating delays. So generally speaking, like 98% of the time, a video will lag behind audio because it takes longer to process video than it does audio. So in your mixer, you can apply a delay to your output that feeds to the stream so you can get them to match up. And you can do this you can do it at the mixer, you can do it in OBS, you can do it in vMix, you can even do it on a hardware switcher. And I believe that Rob is going to show us just how to do that.
In the audio mixer in OBS, all you got to do is right click and go to advanced audio properties, and then put in your sync offset. And for us, it's about 500 milliseconds using OBS. And we've tested it and it works great.
And I see on that same screen, you have the choice of delaying audio. You also have a choice of delaying video if you wanted to. So I see camera 1. So there are times when audio can lag behind video. They're rare, but they're possible. And so sometimes you want to be able to delay your video, and this is where you would do that. Do we have any other questions?
Can I just come in on that one very quickly? The key thing is human nature. We're actually used to seeing video ahead or images ahead of audio. It's a natural occurrence. Somebody's in a far distance away from you, they wave at you and shout, you see them first, and then the audio comes afterwards. So you're used to that. The only time it happens is when it happens in the opposite direction, which we don't understand. Our heads can't understand it, which means that even a few frames of audio ahead, you notice it. You won't normally notice it the other way around. Literally every time you notice lip sync, it'll be because the audio is ahead of the video. And that's why you need to adjust it back, because people can't, it just doesn't feel natural.
Yeah, there is always that thing of audio is going to travel much faster than video. So here's my ATEM. This is a Blackmagic ATEM Mini Extreme. It's got a lot of buttons, but really at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. That it's, you know, camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4. This one actually has up to 8 inputs. Now I'm using a combination of you know, the best of both worlds, where I'm feeding my hardware switcher into my vMix. So I'm using hardware. Oh yeah, hey Leo, nice to see you over there. I'm using hardware into software. So what's the benefit of this? This is just solid, you know, like it's going to do its thing. It's going to do as it's told every time. Like same with the bigger ones. That there's something called a Grass Valley, which is what's used in the news station. But this is basically the same operations. You're just cutting. Oh, that camera just went to sleep. You're basically just cutting between, actually, this is kind of a cool thing that I'm using, even though that battery just died. It's just a wireless HDMI camera. I'm using a wireless device to send this signal wirelessly. So this is a transmitter into a receiver. So if you ever did want to do like a stage shot, just charge your batteries first. It's kind of a nice way to go, is to have optional roaming cameras, so to speak, if you do have operators. But yeah, at the end of the day, I love software because I can throw in slides at the last minute. We do have some software called Playout B that works on a Raspberry Pi for $99, and it's kind of cool because you can add the slides or the video in from a web browser. So anybody can be anywhere in the building, and they just go to a URL and they can drop stuff even last minute, because that's what happens to us every once in a while at more of these corporate shows where we're seeing you know, these requests come in for, hey, can you include this thing? And so it's really easy with software.
That never happens in church.
Yeah, it never happens in church. Actually, that's true. It did happen to me just recently, where they were like, hey, we got some zoning changes, so we're going to pull up a map. Can you pull this up? And it was just like that, you know, like last minute. And then I said, yeah, give me a USB stick. And they said, no, just shoot the screen. And I was like, really? No, I can take it. I have the capability. I can take it. So it all depends on what you want to do and how good you want that show to look. You know, I'm a big proponent of, you know, the person I'm serving is the person in the audience, and I'm their eyes. I always want the best quality. But at the end of the day, it's like, if it's a big hassle or a big lift, because we have converters, like we can use these things called decimators that'll take the output of a computer and convert it properly, convert it over to an HDMI or SDI signal. So you can get pretty deep with this stuff pretty quick. It just depends, again, on budget and how stable you want it to be. So when we're talking about hardware versus software can crash. Software can update blue screen right before a show. So if you want the ultimate, I like the flexibility of both, where I can get bailed out. So I like to be able to add my graphics and things through my vMix. And so I'll typically run both. If I'm doing something that's more of a corporate type show, I'll run hardware into software.
Yeah, using combinations definitely adds a lot of flexibility, right? And the ATEM switchers, even the minis, like the 4-input Mini Pro, can actually stream out. It has an encoder built right into it, but it doesn't stream to Zoom. It can stream to YouTube and Facebook and a bunch of other platforms, but Zoom is not. You know, Zoom is a different kind of animal. That really requires a computer terminal, but it could be a laptop. It can be almost any kind of computer, even a tablet almost can stream out to Zoom. So you can have backups, and backups are really important to have too. But hardware switchers, yeah, they're hardware. It's a dedicated piece of equipment that is designed and purposed to do one thing and one thing really well, and to almost never crash. But computers can do lots of things on you.
Some of them, even at the highest level, will have redundant power supplies, because that's one of the, if the hardware is going to fail, that's one of the biggest ones that fail. And some of the bigger ones that I've seen, they have redundant power supplies. So even then, if that goes out, you're not going to go down. So it just depends on what level you want to play at. You know, like the 4ME from Blackmagic, you're in the, you know, or the Constellation is 9,995, and you can throw redundant power supplies on it. But are you ready to drop 10 grand plus the panel for that's another 20? So, you know, you can get in it pretty deep, pretty quick.
Which one are you holding up, Leo?
So I'm at the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, which is the very smallest, which is the original Blackmagic A10 Mini, which, if I remember rightly, is $299, somewhere around there. I actually wouldn't recommend buying this one because there's some features that the next model up, the Pro, have, which would make this sort of semi-redundant quite quickly. Because this doesn't have a multi-out, which the Pro does. What's the price on the Pro Guy at the moment, roughly?
I believe it's 695, and the big thing is the multi-view. Yeah, so you
That's
can
the
change that
multi-view.
HDMI out to be so you can see camera 1 through 4, and before you take it. So if you're using PTZs, you can see that shot before you commit. And that's the nice thing about these hardware switchers is you light it up green. Green is it's in preview, and then when you take, you're taking it and it lights up red.
And even
And
those
these are
little
all. Sorry, go on, Marty.
now, even those little switchers can also store slides and still frames, and even bring in content from computers, right?
Yeah. So I'm on an A10 Mini Pro here, and I can swap between stills. I can just take my camera out and go into different angles and things. I can even, if I want to, bring up a picture of myself. It's actually going to come in because I'm on the wrong thing, but it would be normally a picture that I can bring in, but I'm on the wrong switch. So they do a ton of stuff. And when we had a discussion here with some others, as Guy said, the buttons. It's literally you press that button equals that. Typically, what I end up doing is I write equivalent of a scribble label underneath it and say that button is that camera, that button is that camera, and that button is that camera, and it's like that's it. You're done.
Right. Whereas with a software switcher, you're generally operating it with a mouse or with shortcut keys, or you could set it up with a Stream Deck to automate certain functions. But with a hardware switcher, you have the dedicated buttons right there with all of the features available at your fingertips. Joe, is there another question?
One of the ways, real quick, just that I'm cutting between things is I am using one of those Stream Decks. And so I have this one in my hand where I've put one of those little pop sockets. And so if I want to cut, I'm just going to press the fade button and it'll cut to my other scene just that quick. And then if I want to do picture in a picture, I just push this button and that brings up the picture in a picture.
And you're switching which device from that?
I'm switching vMix with this, but I could also switch the Blackmagic. You just program these buttons to do whatever you want.
It's a way to apply automation control to these systems, which is really handy because once you program those buttons to do specific things, they will always do those things. And it's much easier to train somebody to push this now and push that then than go into computer with a mouse and pick this, pick that, set this up. Yeah, no, it's makes things very easy and very consistent to operate. Do we have any other questions? I think we do.
There's one coming in and there's one existing. John Lika from Silver Spring says, okay, so what makes for a good software switching workstation a good gaming computer? I guess he's asking for specs of the
That is a really
computer.
good question, Guy.
Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to, especially if you are using something like vMix. So looking at these on the Mac, the Mimo Live software, it is basically like, you want a hot rodded computer. Live stream it's a resource hog. It's kind of scary how much that thing soaks up. vMix is super efficient, but yet you're right. The gaming computers, because they have a GPU, specifically an NVIDIA graphics card. So if you're looking at even a laptop, like I'm just running a laptop. This is a Razer gaming laptop, and it is a champ. Like I did have to upgrade the RAM, but it's an i7 with a GeForce 2070 graphics card that has 8 gigabytes of video memory. So video memory is a big thing for the software switchers that are written for it. So vMix in particular. OBS, I'm not sure how much it takes up of advantage of the GPU in getting hardware acceleration. But basically, if you get one of these Dell gaming computers or these Republic of Gamers, any modern one, even from Costco, is going to do the job. It's going to be able to switch multiple cameras in HD, even 4K, and it'll be able to output a stream, some of them even multiple streams at the same time. So yeah, even your local, I'd say $1,000 for a laptop from Costco, and you're running. It's really that simple.
I think one of the things is guys saying though, you've got to be super careful. There are some gaming laptops which don't have that video card. And there is if you go onto the NVIDIA website, there's a link. It's very easy. Just look for NVIDIA in code, and it will give you this page that gives you each card that they have and how many encodes it will do. Guy will probably have it up in about 10 seconds. There's this grid, the matrix, and then the matrix, it'll tell you if that card, how many times it'll support encoding. And bear in mind, if you're doing multiples, so say you're going out to the internet and you're also putting it somewhere else, etc., it is better to be having a card that can support a multiple encode. But that's the biggest single thing. I have seen people buy what they thought was a gaming laptop, and really there's not much you could say, but I can't fix something I can't fix. The other thing you do need also is
encodes.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, just clarify the term encodes. Multiple encodes, you said.
Okay, so typically when you're watching something, you're watching a movie, you're decoding a video to show it on your screen. So if you're sitting there watching, if you turn on your laptop and you watch Netflix, and you've also got YouTube running, etc., at the same time, 3 or 4 of those, you are pushing your video card because it's doing 2 or 3 decodes. The other side of it is you've got to convert the videos in, so you've got to encode it and turn it into a stream. One of the really nice things about using a hardware switcher that Guy was saying is you're just getting one feed in, so you're actually only dealing with one camera. But if you're running something like vMix, you're physically rendering a multiple numbers of videos at one time, and the more that you put onto the screen at the same time, so if you get really clever and you end up with a 3-camera shot all appearing at the same time, you're having to do all of those at the same time, and you're pushing the native chips with NVIDIA, and they literally the majority of their cards will allow you to do 3 encodes at once. And actually, funny enough, the more expensive, brand new, latest gaming cards have not increased the number of encodes that I'm aware of. It's still the same level. So buying a super expensive video card isn't actually necessary. I think it's the 1050 Ti off the top of my head. It's the 1050 Ti is still used to be the bang for the buck, about $120 card. Gives you exactly the same performance as the mega expensive ones, but that may have been updated since.
Yeah, and that's the RTX line within NVIDIA, right? Guy, you had something to add?
Yeah, one more thing about the software versus hardware is a lot of the hardware is all HDMI, SDI, and these are just the typical broadcast style runs, whereas the modern day easy one home run cable is Cat 6, Cat 5, or existing infrastructure that might already be there. You can run NDI. And so with a software switcher, you have that camera control, audio, and video over, and power, if it's power over Ethernet, over one. So Rob's cameras, he's running, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, you're just running one cable?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's something to really think about when you're making this decision is, how am I going to control those cameras? Because on my example, we actually ran, I believe it was, I didn't do the install, so I'm not positive, but I think it was an HDMI to converter, but then we had to run the serial control for the joystick. So we still did it old school analog style, even though it was a modern camera with NDI built into it. They just kind of bought for the future. And so later on, eventually, and they even ran the cabling. The infrastructure is there. They just haven't made the investment in vMix or decided to go that route. But in the future, I'd love to see them go that route, because there's some powerful stuff that you can do with NDI as far as routing and throwing stuff around. It's very simple, especially if you really get somebody who knows networking. You can really do some powerful stuff with routing nurseries and overflows and things like that.
NDI is a really interesting network video audio networking technology that is, it's only been around for a few years, but the improvements that they've made are astounding. Not only is it very capable of taking in feeds from your cameras, but it can also be used for distribution to your displays. It can send display to your projector. It can send display to your lobby camera. It can send displays to your classroom cameras if you have them. It's really, really efficient in that it all runs over your data network. And that's a really good distinction between hardware switchers and software switchers. Is NDI only works with software switchers, at least at this point that we know.
Well, then you can convert them back over, so that BirdDog makes some converters, and MageWolf does as well. So you basically have a device that's on the network, identifies itself as NDI 02573, and you just say, oh, that's the nursery, and then you can send that feed over to that device. So it's very flexible in the routing once you get it. I actually like to even use just Apple TVs. There's a $99 app that you can get for an Apple TV. So you're in it like $200 for the Apple TV, $200 for the device, and it's still cheaper than a BirdDog. Plus, you can visually switch between, with the remote, you can visually switch between the sources. So it's a pretty handy way to go. And so I see a lot of people doing that. They just get an Apple TV and call it a day. Because once you buy the software once, you can use it on as many Apple TVs as you want. So if you have 4 different places for it to run, you're then only doing $199 per, or even I think it's $179 for the 32 gig Apple TV.
Now somebody brought up the question about if you have cameras in the sanctuary, and we could have one in the center, one on the left, one on the right, and how does a person who's speaking on stage know which one to look at? We're talking about tally lights, which is some sort of an indicator that is viewable from the stage that tells the person speaking which camera is active at any given moment, so they know which one they want to look at if they want to look at a camera. And there are various ways to do that. You can get an external tally light system that can provide any number of lights. It interfaces to your computer or your software switcher. But we've been mentioning this camera manufacturer named BirdDog, which is an Australian manufacturer, and they make a variety of pan-tilt zoom and fixed cameras. But they are a big proponent of NDI technology. And they've been running this promotion. Not that I'm selling, trying to push BirdDogs, but the value is there. They have this package where if you buy 3 of the particular cameras, they include a free camera controller, which is worth about $1,500. And they're also to churches, they're also giving for free a lot of software that can do camera tallies for free. So on your cameras there, and Guy is showing this, perhaps we can spotlight that.
Yeah, that's the 3 camera bundle with the controller there. Pretty nice controller, nicer than the one that I use. So that's one thing to actually point out. This controller has, the nice zoom rocker, and you can actually twist as well to do focus. And then you got presets. I think it's like 199 presets, and you can actually do color as well as iris. So there's a lot of things that you can do over NDI that make a system, we call it painting the lens or painting the camera. Being able to do things like iris control is pretty powerful. If you don't have a controller, you might be fighting things. And we were talking about the AV speed, like the zoom speed. That's a dial there. So you just rotate that dial and you can control zoom speed just that fast. So if you're two-handing it, you can be running that zoom speed as well as the zoom rocker at the same time. So, and then of course you got all the presets that you can recall. Yeah, that's a pretty, and the quality, I mean, I do sell these, so take it with a grain of salt, but you can watch some videos online. The picture quality of these is outstanding because it's what they call full NDI. So not to get too deep into the weeds, but the full NDI color space means you're getting the full meal deal. The NDI HX cameras are compressed. This picture is stunning. But go ahead and jump on YouTube and see what you think. And there's other manufacturers out as well. I'm just pointing this one out as one of the options. Of course, there's
Right.
PTC Optics, Lumens.
And when you get the Tally Light package thrown in for free, that's quite a value. So give us an idea of the ballpark of this package.
I want to say that each of those cameras would be $27.99 by themselves, but it's like $8,500, I think. When you buy all of them, you get the controller free. So is that math right? I have to double check.
Yeah, that about 8,500 sounds about right. That's quite a deal for an upper level package. That's quite a nice deal.
And then you could see the Tally light on the top of these. That little green light right there would let you know that that's in preview mode. And then red would be that you're hot.
So that's really valuable for people, who are talking on stage to know which camera to look to. Questions. Let's see what we have.
Matt from Mexico, who we did his needs analysis last week, said, what might you recommend as the next step up from a small hardware switch like an my A10 Pro if you need more than 4 inputs, for example, for several fixed cameras?
I would say the A10 Extreme.
Goes straight to the
which
That's
has
it
8 cameras and a whole bunch of other features for right around $1,000, right?
Yeah,
just under $1,000.
And then if you need recording capability for $12.99, you can get the ISO, and it would actually record all 8 of those inputs as well. So this one is really neat, and the fact that it has 2 USB outs, so you actually get the ability to record to a hard drive, like a little SSD from Samsung, or you can or simultaneously stream into your vMix or Zoom or whatever you want. So it takes all these HDMI cameras in and then kicks it back out to USB. Or you can drive a Mac and a PC because it's got USB out. So you can drive 2 for redundancy if you want to do that as well. So A10 Mini Extreme.
And so let's just touch on what ISO is.
Yeah, ISO is in two different ways we use that term. One is ISO, where we'll say isolated recording. So that's mostly the way people will say it. Typically in a rack, you would see a bunch of decks. And so we would say we're going to ISO record cameras 1 through 4, and then the 5th one would be for program. So if we need to go back and edit the show later because the person cutting the show made a mistake or a graphic came up that was misspelled or something like that, we can go back to the original. So it's really nice to have this option. And before, it was super expensive because we used to buy these things called AJ Key Pros, and they were $4,000 a whack. So 4,000 times 4, and now you can do that with an ISO, which is it blows my mind how inexpensive things have gotten, and it's stable too. I mean, that's the other thing is this is, even though it's new, it works. Like there's lots of people out in the field using this stuff already, and they're successful. So the other stuff, it could be kind of iffy back in the olden days. I mean, we're coming into this at a great time where the bugs have really been shaken out of these hardware devices. Like they just work. Your stream's not going down just for the hardware. Like that's the great thing, because these are based on what they call FPGA. So we can flash these firmwares just over. If a bug's detected overnight, we can basically push out new functionality and fixes just that fast. So it's amazing how the hardware now can be updated in the field to add new features, kind of like a Tesla. And that's all it is. It's just programmable chips. And that's the world that we're living in. But yeah, ISO is isolated.
Teslas
recording.
are not cheap though.
Yeah.
Teslas are nowhere near affordable yet.
So typically, when we would be recording the output of our switching, we would be recording the cut show, which is what the viewer is watching, and that would be what we have to work with for for storing on YouTube or on our website for playback. But the option to have every camera recorded separately, just like we do with multi-track audio, gives you the flexibility to go back into that stream and either fix up mistakes that were made or bad shots or something, or cut a completely different show. And if you were to archive these files, you would be able to have a recording of every camera all the time. And so sometimes you want to go back and there's somebody that is being caught on camera, but they may not be the focus of the stream at that point. But it's footage that you might want to use for something later that is completely unanticipated. So having all of this footage in archiving can become very valuable for historic purposes and other things. Before we get to the next question, I'd like to take a step back to John Leica's question about good software switching workstation. And we're talking about graphics cards. I wanted to just explore the different components of a computer and the demands that different softwares and different functions have on those components, because they're different. There are applications and functions that are heavily dependent on the graphics cards and on graphics CPUs. And there are other functions that are heavily dependent on the computer's processing, the computer's CPU itself. And then there's the power supply in the computer, which is an often overlooked but very, very important component. So if we can talk, amongst the panelists about which do we need to pay attention to and when we're shopping for a computer. So the graphics card, if you're doing graphics editing, like if you're using DaVinci Resolve or whatever you're using to edit videos on, chances are that's very dependent on your graphics card because you're manipulating a lot of graphical video. Some streaming software is dependent on the graphics card. But the actual stream, which is going out the Ethernet port, is more likely to be dependent on the computer's CPU, right? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it was mentioned earlier by Guy that OBS used to just use the CPU of the computer. It now has an option to change to use the encode of the GPU, the graphical processor on there, so it can use either. Typically when you are using OBS, if that's the one you're going to use, in fact, this is the same on every single streaming software. You need to watch your CPU usage. You need to watch they've all got some sort of thing that will tell you how hot your computer is getting. And if you get hot, what actually will happen is that the audio will continue and you'll just start losing frames. The computer, to keep up, it just starts throwing away frames. It can't keep up with it. And so your encode and your output will be there. And you'll look at it and you'll say, that looked really great. Then you'll go and watch it back on YouTube and you're going, why did we lose half of the video halfway through? What happened? It's because your computer got overloaded. The other thing that you will find is that you typically want to save it locally. You really, really should be having an SSD disk. And if you don't have an SSD disk, you should be having an SSD disk. There's newer versions, but don't have a spinning disk in a streaming computer.
SSD would be solid state data drive rather than a spinning drive that we typically see in computers, right? JLo?
Coming from the Apple Mac perspective, a gaming computer the equivalent would be a Mac Mini. Certainly more powerful than your Mac laptop, your average Mac laptop, and definitely external SSDI drives for recording and locating that off. Moving it off of your main drive is an important thing.
So I know
that there was a question about. using a Mac. I think somebody had asked about using a laptop in streaming, and I don't necessarily think that's the best option, though I could be wrong. I would use a
Um,
Mac Mini.
yeah, in the Mac world at the moment, the new M1 chips, which come in either a MacBook Pro,
Yes.
or an Air or the Mini, are just phenomenal in this. I was talking to somebody yesterday that they're doing stuff in video, and it's just blown them away from their last Mac. It's just so fast, and they're what's the rest of the panel? The price on the Mac Minis?
900
$699
for a
bucks.
Reaver. So I'm sorry, how much?
For a Mac Mini M1, they're 699 bucks.
Y-
Yeah, I'm starting to think more like using these as what I would call glue, and I steal that term from our friend Alex Lindsay on Office Hours, which is a show that a few of us are on, where we start to use computers more like, hey, you're just going to do the encode. Hey, you're just going to do the switcher. So instead of buying one computer and having everything thrown at it, you just kind of segment them off and let them do their own thing, and that way none of them are getting bogged down. And then you don't have to buy one big supercomputer. You're buying several smaller ones, because even an i5 can do a stream. It's just when you start layering on graphics and vmix, what I've noticed is that if you have a bunch of things open, like a bunch of pictures, it keeps all that stuff in memory. And so all of a sudden, if you don't know how to manage those right, it will eat up all that memory. But if you start to segment and put it in lists, you can drop that CPU usage dramatically. I mean, I've seen people go from 90% down to 20. It's like that dramatic. So it's just knowing how to use the software and how to manage things too, and asking questions in forums like, why this isn't right. Like I bought this gaming computer from Costco and it's should be a hot rod, but I'm maxing it out. What's going on? And then people can look at it and tell you, here's why. And so you do got to remember, if you do get vmix, that there is a high performance mode where you do have to enable that GPU. If you don't click it, you're not going to take advantage of it. So you actually purposely have to go in there and enable that GPU. Otherwise, it doesn't detect it itself. You have to manually do it.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody on a Facebook group this week, who was asking about how to get 6 different video outputs from a computer. He wants, he wants to do his multi-view screen to show all of his cameras. He wants to do his preview and program screen. He wants to drive his projector. He wants to drive the screen that is showing teleprompter to the chancel, and he wants to stream out to his classrooms, all from the same computer. And most video, even these great graphics cards that we're talking about, have at most 3 outputs. So he's talking about a computer putting 2 graphics cards in a computer, and doing switching the show and doing the encoding and doing all this stuff in one computer. And I'm thinking, wow, how many eggs are we going to put in one basket? And what kind of power supply do you need in this computer? And the size of the motherboard to put all these big cards in these slots. I mean, I was looking at these graphics cards, these NVIDIA graphics cards, and each card requires, if you look at the power supply requirements, the power supply requirements are massive. You've got to have like a 400 watt power supply in a computer to drive one of these graphics cards. And the graphics card takes up 2 slots on the motherboard. And I bought one of those gaming towers from Costco myself, and with the graphics card that's in there, which takes up 2 slots, there's no room for any other card on the motherboard. So you've got to step up. It's putting too many eggs in one basket means that if there's a problem with that computer, everything is down. So breaking things up into, use a laptop for this and use a Mac Mini for that, and break things up into logical categories so that, if you lose something, you don't lose everything. Everything has a purpose, and nothing is being being overdriven. You're not asking too much from any one device. So that's really good to keep in mind. Leo.
I think what's always really important for everybody who's watching this, the panel, we've been doing this for a while, and we will jump to levels, and you don't have to. I mean, it's really, this is not about saying we're going to install this, we need a budget of $100,000 on day one.
No.
What this is, and Mark has discussed it before, Jay has discussed it before, it's about a gradual thing that you say, we need to put this in to make it better, and then this will be swapped out. Obviously, what you don't want to be buying is equipment that you're going to throw away. Nobody wants to be doing that because it hurts, which is why there are some things, like I talked about the A10 Mini, I would say don't buy a Mini, buy a Pro, because I think that's a base level on there. And there's lots of other bits that you can buy and you can upgrade. You don't have to buy a PC with 64 gig of RAM today. You can just buy it with a minimum. I would say the minimum is 8 gig is like the base minimum that you should be looking at. Anything less isn't worthwhile. But just don't be put off that we keep talking about the ultimates in certain things. We've all gone from one step to one step to one step, and it's just improving it along and looking exactly at something that we were looking earlier at, the camera setup that Rob has got. Is, as Rob said, didn't you start with a fixed camera? Did you say, Rob, and then you moved to the ones that you've got now?
No, initially we had 3 Sony analog PTZ cameras. They were so old, they're analog, so I think their resolution was 470 TV lines.
Yeah, low res. But to your point, Leo, then it is possible to do, to get your stream out and to get reasonable pictures out to your audience with 2 cameras and one of those little YOLO boxes, or just with tablets. Yes, there's a whole range of possibilities. And what I was describing was a conversation that I was having with someone who has all these different applications and all these different displays, and trying to figure out how to do all of that from one computer. And that's just not the best way to do it. But not everybody has to drive all those displays. You can do it very, very simply.
To jump on to the stream here, regarding cost, regarding distributive computing, you don't have to go out and buy towers, gaming computers. What we have done in some of the churches that we service, we actually have multiple industrial fanless computers. There's no fan, it's a solid state drive. There's a company in Israel that makes a ridiculously powerful industrial fanless computer that will withstand all kinds of abuse, which is why we put them in Alaska. And they're not expensive. And you just buy what you need to do what you need. And it's like, okay, this one's going to be controlling. This one's going to do nothing but encode the stream and send it out the door. This one's going to do, and you can actually get an awful lot of processing power for very little money. And the footprint's tiny on these things. They're about this big and about that thick. So you don't need a lot of real estate to house it. I was just looking for it. My boss bought a slew of these things. We use them as like I said, computers in houses of worship where we're doing streaming. We also have found out that there's way more power in a Raspberry Pi 4 than you might imagine. And so we do a lot of Linux. It's a Linux operating system, and we use Python to create some pretty ridiculous control systems.
Mark, are they the CompuLab ones? Tony Main is saying that in
it
the chat.
Might be CompuLab, and they have a new one out that is stupid powerful.
Do you have any other similar ones, Guy, that you could suggest or that you know?
It's funny because during the show, Amazon just delivered a B-Link feeling by Courtney, for those of you that are watching on from office hours. So this guy Courtney on the show has been bragging about this small form factor. That's what they call them, small form factor, SFF based computers that are like i5s, that some of them actually have GPUs on them now. So the one that I have that's sitting on my porch right now is, don't go get it. It's still out there. I got the hot rodded one.
Gonna do an unboxing on the show.
Let me go grab it. Let me see if I could grab one of my kids to get it, and I'll have them.
All right. Well, let's. So here's what we're going to do. It's 9:00, and we've dedicated ourselves to limiting the formal part of the show to 2 hours. So it's 9:00, and we have a couple of questions left, and we're going to get to them, but we're going to get to them in the after show. So I'm going to close out the recording, close out the formal part of the show, and then stand by, and we'll come back. All right. Okay. So I'd like to thank our panelists and our guests today for such a wonderful conversation, very deep, informative, talking about camera shots and appropriateness and feeling and emotion, storytelling and hardware and software. I mean, there's so much to this. It was wonderful. I hope that you, our viewers, have enjoyed our time together, and perhaps you found it informative, enlightening, enriching, energizing, and motivating. Let's get out there and really do some good work. Watch the Discord for agendas for upcoming shows, where you can find the recordings of our past shows, announcements of upcoming events, and this is all new stuff to us. We're all learning and figuring this out together. Next week, we're going to do another needs assessment for our second contest winners in the middle category of 1 to 200 seating capacity in the sanctuary. That's going to be really, really interesting. We have sound mixer training coming up on Monday at 3:00. And next week, I think we're going to start live streaming on YouTube. So in addition to our place here on Zoom, there's going to be a little bit of a wider audience that we can attract and generate and grow the show, and that's going to be great. The difference is that if you're watching on YouTube, you're just going to be watching. You won't be able to participate. There'll be no questions. Well, you can actually address your questions in the Discord. Being here on the show means you get to participate a little bit closer. And so come on back. Thank you very much and have a good night.